Hello, everyone. So, our topic of discussion for today is the latent learning. Now, what is this latent learning? Latent learning says that a new behavior is learned but is not demonstrated until reinforcement is provided for displaying it. So, for actually displaying the learned behavior, reinforcer is a must in case of a latent learning. Definitely, a new behavior has been learned, but it will not be demonstrated, it will not be exhibited until and unless a reinforcer is provided. So, to prove this, there was an experiment that was conducted by Tolman where he actually had made use of hungry rats, and he basically put these hungry rats into two groups of rats, and they were put up in a maze, and they actually got an opportunity to also explore the maze, to literally find a layout through the maze. So one of the groups that Tolman made, the rats actually found food at the end of the maze and could very well learn to make their own way very rapidly through the maze. On the other hand, the ones that were kept in the second group, the rats, they were not rewarded anything upon reaching the end of the maze, and therefore they did not really show any apparent signs of learning. So basically, what Tolman did was that coming to, of course, the second group that were actually not rewarded. So even if these rats were unreinforced, but still they actually could explore the maze. They developed, a cognitive map. A cognitive map is like, it's a mental picture of the layout of the maze, because they'd actually been going and making their way through the maze. Literally, they could make a mental map of it, they could make a mental picture of it, a mental representation of the many spatial locations and directions which actually were very essential to reach the end of the maze. So they were quite familiar with all those spatial locations and the directions. So they were ready with that mental picture, or so to say the mental representation, the mental map, which is the cognitive map. So even these unreinforced rats were ready with that mental map in their head. So but of course, each time whenever they went through the maze, there was nothing kept in the end of the maze, literally. So after many sessions, of not really reinforcing these rats, in the end, of course, after a couple of sessions, food was placed, in the end of the maze. So even these hungry rats of the second group were given food in the end. So it was found that as soon as these rats, they became aware of the food. So they were actually able to find their way through the maze very, very quickly, as quickly as the first group rats. So who were actually being rewarded with food all along. So this is what is called latent learning. So learning that occurs, but it is not observable in behavior until there is a reason to demonstrate it. So definitely the learning will occur, and it does occur, but that learning, it's not something that we can see, we cannot observe that learning you know uh, only when there is some reinforcer, or that is being reinforced, only then, maybe we can actually observe that learning also. So that is the kind of experiment, that Tolman had demonstrated, and Tolman had taken help of, group of these hungry rats. Of course, group one did receive food right from the beginning till the end, and group two hungry rats received it after a couple of sessions. And as soon as they became aware that food is there, so the way they made their way through the maze, that was way quicker actually, just like the group one rats. So definitely in this kind of learning, a new behavior is learned, definitely. Even for the unreinforced rats, a mental map was made. A mental picture was quite ready of the various spatial locations and the directions. They were quite ready with the way or the layout of the maze, but they were just not demonstrating this because there was no motivation for them, there was no reinforcer for them. So that is why in latent learning, a new behavior is definitely learned, but it will not be demonstrated, until and unless it is reinforced, you know. And we can very well understand this, with the help of an example, from a daily life. So from our daily lives, we can very well understand how this latent learning works. So many a times, we see children that they learn so much, by literally watching the actions of their parents, but they demonstrate it at a later stage, so for example, we just can take or maybe think of an example, very common one. Let's say there's a young boy named Vishal. So Vishal's father drives Vishal to school every day, you know. And in this way, Vishal in a way has learnt the route, from his house to his school, but he's never really driven himself. So he's never really had the chance to demonstrate that he's actually learnt the way from his house to the school, you know so one fine morning, Vishal's father, he has to urgently leave early morning for a meeting. So, like he's not able to drop Vishal to school. Instead, Vishal follows the same route on his bike that his dad would have taken, in the car. So, this demonstrates essentially the latent learning. Vishal has, and of course, in the past, Vishal had learnt the route to school but had no need to demonstrate this knowledge earlier. But when the need comes, when there is motivation, that motivation is there, then this kind of learning will be demonstrated. Of course, this will be exhibited, this kind of learning. So, obviously, for the rats, the motivation is what? The food that's lying at the end of the maze. Here in this example, if we go through this example, which we experience in our daily lives, what is the motivation for Vishal? The motivation is his school, daily study, maybe reach on time, to be there for the assembly, you know so there are so many motivators for us. And when that motivation is not there, when that is absent, you know, that kind of behavior will not be exhibited, even if it's learned. It will only be demonstrated once the reinforcer is provided. So Tolman had explained this entire study, with the help of these hungry rats very beautifully, that what actually happens in latent learning. Thank you so much.